we're going to go ahead and get started. I have noon on my watch. I want to welcome everybody to this month's Parent Awareness. My name is Lindy Walker. I'm coordinating the Parent Awareness meetings for the PTO. This is put on by the Vestavia Hills High School PTO. We're excited today to have Dr. Susan Walley, who is a professor at UAB. She works as a hospitalist at Children's Hospital, and she's also a Vestavia parent. So she actually has children in the system. And she graciously presented last night. We had a great crowd at the high school because this is a hot topic. And the reason it's a hot topic is because this new trend of vaping, and let's use the word juuling, because that's kind of the kids' lingo, has become very socially accepted. So if you're like me and you're a parent, I'm very guilty of, oh, that crowd does this. Oh, those kids do that. Let me just tell you, everybody's juuling. Everybody. And if you don't believe that, you might have your head in the sand. So I love that we're here. I love that we're educating ourselves so that we can have intentional conversations with our kids. Yes, the school can do all they want to. They can make it a level 2, 3, 4, whatever disciplinary action. But if we're not educating our own children and having intentional conversations, I don't think we're going to see a lot of change. Because again, it's something that everybody's doing. And I think the kids actually kind of have fun with it because they know the parents don't know about it and they're getting away with it. And we all think that they've got, thumb drives. We're thinking, oh, that's a thumb drive, and really it's a Juul. So ask questions. Dr. Walley was great last night answering so many questions. Our topic for next month is depression and suicide in teens. And you'll see that on the PTO. I can't even remember who's speaking. It's Cindy Walley, who will be presenting, and she's done a lot of research in that area and is a known psychologist, and so she'll be presenting next month. So, all right, Dr. Walley, thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and I just want to thank Lindy and Tracy for having this, and then Principal Burgess also for kind of bringing this up. This is an area that I have been involved with on multiple different levels, on advocacy levels, with the National American Academy of Pediatrics. I've been doing research projects with it, but I think most importantly, as Lindy mentioned, I'm a parent of 3 boys who are 9, 12, and 15, and as I think all of you guys know as parents, when somebody tells you something and you're doing it yourself as a parent, those are really kind of different things. And so I'm coming to you guys with medical knowledge and some of the things related to what's going on nationally. But as a community in Vestavia, I think we have to decide what can we do, what should we do, and so I'm so excited to see all of you guys. I'm going to kind of be going back and forth between the podium and the table of displays. And I definitely want to pass all those out, and I want you guys to really be able to see what these products look like. So I think, really, I have been giving versions of this talk for several years, and it really has been very challenging, both on the scientific level and as an advocate, about what these products look like. And what you're seeing second from the top is an actual traditional cigarette. And the first e-cigarettes really started out looking very much like a traditional cigarette, like the blues. Has anybody heard of the blues? I mean, these are kind of out in terms of our kids nowadays. But this is what I think a lot of us think about as electronic cigarettes. And I think the thing really definitely for you guys to know is that, for kids, what we're going to be talking about is using the terminology electronic cigarettes, but the kids are not calling them electronic cigarettes. But just from a kind of science perspective and a research perspective, when you hear the term electronic cigarette, it really means all of these different products. But as you can see from this picture, this looks nothing like the blue. It looks nothing like a traditional cigarette. And what you're seeing on the top right is Juul, and we're going to talk about, we're going to have a deeper dive. And the reason that it doesn't look like this, which of course looks just like a flash drive, is that you can purchase these Juul skins on like Etsy or Amazon or whatever. And then some of the other products that have gained, I mean, not so much, of course, as Juul, but the Soren product that Principal Burgess was very kind to let me display because he has a whole box of these things that have been confiscated from students. And then SMPO is also another product that, again, it looks like a razor to me. Like if somebody, had that in their pocket, if I was not involved in this work, would automatically have no idea that it was an electronic cigarette or an e-cigarette. So let's talk a little bit more about Juul. And so Juul, people will say, is the iPhone of smartphones. It comes in this very nice packaging. This cost me $49.99, and it comes in very sleek packaging. Basically, that pays for a starter kit, which is one Juul device, and then 4 pods. And so Juul is known as a pod system. And so this is the whole device. You plug it in, you can charge it in your computer, for typical USB. So, all of this is very small, very discreet. You can palm it, you can put it in your pocket, nobody's gonna see. And basically there's these pods that come in these delicious flavors, and we know flavors are very appealing to kids. So creme brulee, cool cucumber, mango. Mango and cool cucumber seem to be kind of the introductory products for a lot of kids. You can imagine, it just sounds cool. They do have tobacco flavor, but surprisingly, most of our kids, that's not what really draws them. Oh, I'm going to get tobacco flavored Juul. No, they're using the fruit medley and some of these others. And so basically each pod is about 1 milliliter. It's called a closed system because it contains this liquid. And the thing that really makes Juul a game changer, which I definitely want to make sure that all of you guys are aware of, is that the liquid, the e-liquid, a lot of times we'll call it, is a very, very concentrated nicotine solution, 59 milligrams per milliliter. And if you want to take that in a little bit of a comparison, when you talk about a typical cigarette, the actual nicotine that you're going to absorb from one cigarette is about 1 to 2 milligrams. So each pod has 59 basically milligrams in it, and each one cigarette is what you're going to get 1 to 2 milligrams when you smoke it. So, it's not necessarily a fair comparison because you're not going to be absorbing the whole 59 milligrams in each pod, but I think that it is really important for you guys to know, and that is what is concerning a lot of public health advocates, pediatricians, obviously you guys as parents, because, if kids don't know that there's nicotine in it, I'm going to pass along this packaging. Nowhere on here does it, other than in really small font that my 44-year-old eyes cannot even see, yeah, it says 5% nicotine. Nowhere on here is it obvious that this contains nicotine. So one of the things that last night that really got brought up is people were like, oh, these contain no nicotine. My child told me there's no nicotine.
All of them, all the flavors have nicotine.
All the flavors. So Juul,
you can't buy a non-nicotine.
Exactly. In Juul, now that's not necessarily true of all the pod systems. So here's something called Fix. I'm not that familiar with it, but there was definitely, this is Dr. Burgess's stack of things, but it's also a pod system. But in Juul, there's basically one concentration of nicotine, which is that 59 milligrams per milliliter. There is no pod that has 0 nicotine. Now, last month, Juul did come out with a lower nicotine concentration, but that is still about, it's in the 35 region, 35 milligrams per milliliter. So we're still talking about an extremely high nicotine concentration, and particularly a youth who's thinking, oh, I'm just trying this because I love creme brulee and it's cool, there's other kids that are doing this, it can't be bad for me. You can develop nicotine addiction in just 2 weeks. And so before we know it, we're looking at a product that people are making billions of dollars, and they're making it on the backs of our kids who are using this product. They're getting addicted, and then once you're addicted, we're talking about potentially a lifelong addiction. So I'm a pediatrician, but I also head the tobacco consult service at UAB Hospital. And so, some of the stuff that I think really is very when I pass some of this stuff around, really important for parents to know is that most adult smokers have become addicted by the time they're 19 years of age. And, tobacco use kills 500,000 people every year. And once you're, a teenager, we know you're more likely to be addicted. And then what happens is you have this lifelong addiction that kills 1 in every 2 smokers, cigarette smokers. And what data do we have about e-cigarettes and health? We're going to get into that. So, but just to finish out Juul, I know there was a lot of questions about that yesterday. Juul at this point in third quarter of 2018 is about 3/4 of the e-cigarette market. And so although I definitely think that it's important for parents and educators to know different products, Juul is really what we're seeing a lot of in youth. And access and enforcement of some of the current tobacco ordinances, I think, is again is a question that our community, the Vestavia community, and the Over the Mountain and the Birmingham community can really be talking about. So does anybody have any questions about Juul before we move ahead? Yeah.
Are these the ones that were blowing up in people's pockets, or?
I have not, so that's a really great point. One of the risks we know, and we'll kind of get into, e-cigarettes have an LED battery, and that has, been in the media a lot about blowing up. Juul specifically, I have not heard, but, that is definitely a potential, particularly in we have an unregulated market right now. So the Juul product itself has virtually no regulation. Great question, yeah.
So how does it work? Basically, it makes sense with vapor?
Yeah, okay, so we'll go, yeah, great question. So I think that might be perfect. I set you up for that. You set me up for that. So even though a lot of these electronic cigarettes look very different, Juul looks really different than what a lot of times people will call these mod systems. This is sort of more commonly known as a vape pen. And I think it is important for you guys to also see these products, although I think youth have not been using these as much. And the reason is that they're open systems. And what that means is that people can literally open the vape pen and they can use e-liquid, and then this one is donuts, right? Who wouldn't be, what kid would not want that? This is, I think some of you guys already, commented on, this looks exactly like Sour Patch Kids, and that's not an accident. And so they can take this liquid and they put it into a vape pen, these open systems, and they can also put other things in those. And we know that that is also happening. But to go on to answer your question, that basically, although a lot of these do look different and are different, the inner workings have a lot of similarities. And so if you look at this visual, basically, what you'll do when you use an electronic cigarette is that you're inhaling, you're taking that drag, and most of the time, with the Juul, for example, it activates a battery. And the battery heats a coil, it's a metal coil, and it takes that liquid and it aerosolizes the liquid. And that's what causes the vapor. And so that liquid, and that's why sometimes I talk about it interchangeably, but this liquid gets aerosolized into a vapor, and the liquid contains humectant, which is propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin, and that's like that stage smoke. Have you guys all seen the stage smoke? So basically, part of what's in here is that humectant, and that is what you see the smoke. And then it also contains flavoring chemicals and nicotine. The vast majority of the time, these products do have nicotine, although our kids may not realize it does. So that's kind of the inner workings of the electronic cigarette. Does that answer your question?
Does it actually go down into your lungs and then come back out?
Yes, so similar to, so it's different than a combustible tobacco product like a cigarette, but in terms of like the vapor, it's the same way. You inhale, and unfortunately, and we'll get into a little bit more, what we found when we scientifically look at that vapor is that it actually has even smaller particles than what you would get from a cigarette. And so you can imagine if you have these ultrafine particles, it can get even deeper within your lungs than cigarette smoke. And then, you do have some absorption of the ultrafine particles, the toxicants, there's heavy metals that we found. And then you'll exhale, and that will be secondhand vapor. Have you guys all heard the term secondhand smoke, I'm sure? And there's a lot of data and scientific evidence now that, people who are exposed to secondhand smoke do have a lot of the same health problems. And right now, the science with e-cigarettes and secondhand vapor is really too new to know this is exactly what it's going to cause. But if you have the same bad stuff, it makes sense that there's going to be a lot of the same health effects. So great question. Okay, so basically I have 4 main points that I want to get across to you guys. And I'm just going to tell you now, because I know some people need to leave, and there's a lot of information in this. But, e-cigarettes starting from 2014 are the most common tobacco product used by youth. And I think, really what's important for you guys to know is that that e-cigarettes and any nicotine-containing solution is a tobacco product. And I think that there has been a lot of kind of misinformation about that. And the reason that's important is that the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, regulates tobacco products. Not so much e-liquids right now, but we're hoping that's going to come. And I think a lot of us do know tobacco products are bad. Our kids know tobacco products are bad. But then when they're getting this misinformation, oh, this isn't a tobacco product, well, that's obviously confusing. The tobacco plant is really the only commercially available product, commercially available place to get tobacco, tobacco plants are the only place to get nicotine really commercially right now. I mean, just as a fun fact, like things like potato have like nanograms of nicotine, but you would need 800 pounds of potatoes to get like 1 milligram of nicotine. So nobody's going to do that. Nobody wants to make money, which you know that e-cigarette companies are definitely making lots of money. So e-cigarette, second point, we know that the vast majority of the time when our kids are using them, they do contain nicotine. And we also know that kids are more likely to be addicted. I mean, we all know, people who have had teenagers or, kids who are older, that, your teenagers are not, their brains are not fully mature. And so their brains are more likely to become addicted, even with intermittent, even with very, like what we might consider small usage of nicotine. And so I think when I was growing up, I would say that people would be like, well, people are experimenting, it's okay to try X, Y, and Z, but now we know, really it should be a zero tolerance. We want our kids never to use nicotine or tobacco products because of that risk of addiction and changing the brain chemistry. Third thing is that we know that youth who use e-cigarettes, youth and young adults, are more likely, when we look at people a year later, they're more likely to go on to use traditional cigarettes. And I think I already mentioned 500,000 people are dying every year still from cigarette use. And and 1 in every 2 smokers, basically long-term smokers, will die of a tobacco-related disease. So, while e-cigarettes are not safe, we also have a lot of concerns that this is what's leading them, or this is what's sort of in store for them down the road. And then, again, I think I've already said this several times, but we know that they're not safe, and they have negative impacts on public health. So we're going to have a little bit deeper dive into some of those. So this is a bar graph, and there's a lot of information that comes from the National Youth Tobacco Survey. And that's a survey that's done every year. Different states kind of do it a little differently. I've been involved in this NYTS here in Birmingham a couple of years ago. But basically they go around to high school students, and it's kind of a random sampling, and they ask them about their tobacco use and what they use. Now, just as a caveat, when we're talking about the CDC and the process of surveying kids, they're going in and saying, hey, did you use e-cigarettes? And the kids are like, no, I'm not using e-cigarettes. I'm juuling. And so we think that there's really a lot of problems with the survey data, and I think, for those of you parents and educators, what we're seeing on the ground is not what we're seeing on some of these surveys. That we feel that the surveys are underrepresenting how many kids are using these products. But what I'd like to point out is that when we look at any tobacco product, Oh yeah, it's coming up. We're about 25%, and that number has come down, thankfully. Nationally, in Alabama, anybody want to guess what our tobacco use rate is? It's 35%, based on surveys. Now, electronic cigarettes, are included in that, but when we're talking about Alabama compared to any national survey, generally we're double-digit points higher. And then when you look at electronic cigarette use, which is in this red box, the NYTS really only started evaluating e-cigarette use in 2011, which is fair because it really only came on the market in 2006. And so you can see that it starts out with really low 2 to 3% use, and then seemed to peak in 2015. And a lot of us were really pleased. We were like, some of the campaigns that we're doing maybe are helping. And then Juul came on the market basically last year. And so we're really concerned, number one, that this survey instrument is not accurate, and then also that we're going to see these big jumps. And so over mountain data, it's a couple years old, but I think worthwhile for people to see. This is high school student use, and basically it's for the past month. And so the way we kind of get around is this, somebody who has just tried it one time versus somebody who's using all the time is asking, have you used it in the past month? And so the blue, I apologize, that is cigarette use, not just tobacco use. And then the orange is e-cigarette use. And what you see on these graphs is similar to what we're seeing nationally, that more kids are using e-cigarettes than regular cigarettes. And what I think is really notable is that, you see the 9th grade use, these maybe naive 9th graders, they come in, tobacco use is pretty low. In Alabama, the middle school tobacco use rate is about 10%. So, I think about my sweet, not so sweet, but 7th grader. And, it's kind of jarring to think 1 in 10 of his classmates are using a tobacco product or e-cigarettes. And then you can see by 12th grade, if you're believing this information, we're at about 23% for 12th grade. For whatever reason, the 11th graders in this survey seem like a little bit higher. Maybe the 12th graders are thinking about college, I got to shape up, I don't know. And then this is perception of risk. So again, the blue is cigarettes, not just tobacco, and then the orange is e-cigarettes. And we know, and what you're seeing is that kids are like, oh, cigarettes are bad, but e-cigarettes are better. I want to, maybe just poll the audience if you've heard the same stuff. Oh, e-cigarettes are safe, they're water vapor, they're not bad for you. That has been propagated in the media and social media, that it is not a surprise if you know kind of what big tobacco companies have done over the years, that they'll pay people. I don't know if you guys have heard this. There was a big there was a big e-cigarette, there was a youth that was posting multiple YouTube videos about how great the Juul was, how great all these e-cigarettes were, and then it turned out he was making hundreds of thousands of dollars from these companies paying him, and he was on social media acting like, hey, I'm just doing this because I really love e-cigarettes. And, on one hand you can say, like, who's to blame the kid, but the e-cigarette companies are using a lot of that same tactics that big tobacco companies have been doing over the years. So, yeah.
I heard something on Fox News just the other day, and that's a national, well-known, talking about herbal liquids, herbal.
Yes.
There was no mention
Like the
of
essential
anything, it was
oils?
herbal, yes.
Yeah.
It's very healthy, very
Right.
life-enhancing.
Right. Just like you're saying, there's so much out there, and a lot of it is unfortunately not accurate. And some of that has to do with the fact that the market is unregulated really at this point. So, yeah.
So when I buy cigarettes, you need to, in the state of Alabama, 19?
Yes.
What about those?
So all tobacco products, the age of purchase in Alabama is 19. So enforcement is definitely something that, is part of, kind of the multi-pronged approach when we're thinking about how we as a community can tackle this. We talked a lot last night about different initiatives that are happening in other communities. And, one of them is something called Tobacco 21, which increases the age of purchase and use of tobacco products to 21 years of age. And that kind of, and I don't know that we got into it that much last night, but, basically, we know that really nobody in high school in general is going to be 21 years of age. So it kind of prevents that senior buying a bunch of Juul for the freshmen and then introducing them to that product. But yeah, definitely I want to get into that more. So e-cigarettes, part of what I think is really important as we're kind of talking about what Vestavia as a community can do is thinking about where our kids are getting these products. And, I know I don't typically go into a lot of gas stations, but these products are in every gas station. And this is a gas station in Homewood, and I showed the sign because the first time I saw it, I thought, what in the world? And this is the technique of social norming. So the first time you see it, you're like, holy moly. The second time you see it, and then by the 10th time you see it, it's like this is a normal thing. This is what our kids are seeing. And the first time they might be like, tobacco, that's, weird that there'd be a big sign. And then as it continues, and, notice the Juul sign right there, they think this is kind of a normal thing that everybody is doing, so it's okay that I do it too. I did some reconnaissance work, and this is a gas station very near to the high school. All of you guys have probably been there. All our kids have definitely been there, or driving kids. And this is what we call the power wall. So every really gas station, not to call out, but this is a particular concern of mine, the grocery store near the high school has this power wall. And really this power wall in this gas station is about a fourth of it is devoted to e-cigarettes. It's kind of hard to see here. And there is a wide assortment of Juul. And so these products are very easily obtainable. About 70%-ish of youth access to e-cigarettes in surveys that we've done are through convenience stores and like gas stations just like this. But as you pointed out, the age of purchase is 19, but some of the, I think enforcement is an issue. You go to the storekeeper or the salesperson and you say, how old do you have to be to buy this? 18, no, 21, no, so I think that it is clearly going on right under our noses. So, the vape stores, I think, get a lot of notoriety. To my knowledge, there's no vape shops in Vestavia, thank goodness. Definitely that's something that we, as a community, should say. Homewood said that. They have an ordinance that says, or they're working on an ordinance that says no vape shops in our community. But, that's something I think, as a community, we need to decide. And so the other place that kids, yeah, go ahead.
I'm assuming you can buy it online too.
You guys are so good. You're queuing me up for every slide. So the internet is really also of large concern. Surprisingly to me, when I learned the statistic though, like I said, more kids are getting it through retail outlets like convenience stores, gas stations, but the internet is really a big place where there is zero enforcement. So this is a screenshot of the Juul website, and I don't know if you guys can see it, but it says, you must be 21 years of age to purchase products on Juul. And then there's a box that says, I'm 21, or I'm not 21. And I've hit those boxes, and nothing happens to you if you say I'm not 21, and it does take you to how to quit tobacco products. But you can easily just go back into the website and click the I am 21. You put a birthday, and understandably they, when companies say, well, I have no way of regulating this, is that really true? But basically you can put in any birthday and then go on to purchase all of the products. And you hear about people purchasing thousands of dollars worth and then selling it on the black market. So it's clearly, you guys know, it's not a problem for you to be accessing these devices and the liquid at this point. Yeah.
Do you know how much like a Juul costs?
Yeah. So $49.99 for the starter kit, which is a device and 4 pods. And then these on the website are $16 for 4 pods. And so Juul does advertise that each pod is about the same as one pack of cigarettes. That's totally made up. But, we'll hear about kids that are using 1 or 2 pods a day. We already talked about that 59 milligrams per milliliter. So the price point's pretty high. When I talk at Birmingham City Schools, we're not really talking that much about Juul. It is something that I think has to be more for populations that have a little bit more disposable income. And so, yes,
I'm sorry, is the idea to smoke the whole pot at one time, like do 10 breaths or?
you don't have to, yeah. And it's hard to know like exactly how many puffs because it depends on how deep you breathe and sort of what we call the puff topography. But yeah,
Do they smell? I mean, like if your kid came home and had been doing this, would you be able to smell it like you would tobacco smoke?
And Principal Burgess had some really good thoughts about this. So it does not have the same, it's not combusted tobacco. So it's not that burned tobacco leaf that all of us recognize, but it is not true that it is odorless. It is there's definitely a smell, but it does, just from the aerosol, it dissipates more quickly. But I know, not to bring you into it again, but you were saying that if there's a kid who's doing a lot of Juul, you're going to smell not the combusted tobacco, not that burned tobacco, but you'll smell fruit medley or creme brulee. There'll be a telltale smell, but it's not the same, and that's what's so hard.
So if they're smoking in the bathroom or something and you walk into the bathroom, could you smell that they're doing that in the stall?
Yeah.
It's a sour smell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, sometimes it's fruity, it can be sour, and the problem is there's 15,000 flavors. So for me to just say, oh, well, if you smell cool, cucumber smell, that's what makes it really so hard. And I think part of the appeal, like you're getting away with something, and your parents don't know what this is, your teachers might not know. I mean, thankfully at the high school, Principal Burgess has done an amazing job of really educating the teachers and the educators. And so, just a kind of a word about nicotine. So what you're seeing here is the tobacco plant on the far left. That the leaves basically get taken off and dried, and then that makes kind of that ground tobacco leaf that goes into cigarettes, but it's also the exact same thing as what is going into nicotine containing e-cigarettes, Juul, that type of thing. And we know that nicotine is very highly addictive. And, I didn't really realize this before I got into this work, but, people will say who are, polysubstance abusers, they're heroin, cocaine, and tobacco, and they'll say, well, tobacco was the hardest thing for me to quit, and some of that is related to how addictive it is, and then also that it's available everywhere. You go into a gas station, you've got a severe addiction to heroin, well, it's not going to be like really readily available for you to buy. And so it really is important to know that people and our youth who are getting addicted to nicotine, it's a hard habit to break. And so that does lead to thinking about how, if you have a nicotine addicted youth, what is the next step? And we don't have all the answers to that, but clearly I think having a pediatrician get in there, being involved in it is really important. But we know, adding on to what we talked about already, adolescent brains are not mature, and they're really very susceptible to nicotine addiction and other addictions. And then we also know through animal studies that exposure to nicotine in this kind of sensitive time changes your brain chemistry. And so, again, all of us, as parents, we want to make sure that our kids are not doing something that down the road is going to affect them. And I think the other thing that there was somebody from Bradford yesterday that we talked about, we know nicotine is a gateway to other drugs. And as we think about as a community, opiates and, as a nation about opiate use, I think that, when you think about kids starting nicotine addiction early, going on to other products, this is really something that affects, people down the road. And why it's so important to me to really kind of try to address early. All right, so we already talked about how kids who use e-cigarettes are more likely to go on to traditional cigarettes, and this is the scientific, what we call meta-analysis, that shows that if you're 3 to 4 times more likely in 1 year to be using cigarettes regular traditional cigarettes if you use e-cigarettes. And, that is a lot of concern, and it makes sense, right? Like if you're using a hand-to-mouth product, you get addicted to nicotine, that can lead to other things, kind of, not exactly what we call a gateway, but, that makes a lot of inherent sense. And then let's dive in a little bit more to why e-cigarettes are not safe. So we already talked about that e-cigarettes are not regulated right now. But what we see on the bottles is that it has the humectants that we talked about, which is like the stage smoke. And I just ask, don't open these, because if you get the solution on yourself, it really, it can absorb really quickly. And you can get nicotine overdose. The flavoring chemicals, and then nicotine, of course. But what we have found in both the solution, the liquid, and then in the emissions, that vapor, are lots of other things, and many of them, sadly, are exactly what are regular cigarettes. And so, we're talking about volatile organic compounds like formaldehyde, and this screenshot is actually in the CDC infographic that's going around, and I think it's a really good one because it just kind of lays it out there. These are not good things for your body, and the flavors, just to speak, specifically about that, again, there's not regulation about these flavors. There's over 15,000 of them. And so someone pointed out last night, there is an association of the buttery flavor with a certain pulmonary disease called bronchiolitis obliterans. You might have heard of the popcorn lung. So, the individual products, the individual parts of the e-cigarette liquid are really concerning, but since it's unregulated right now, we honestly don't know what they say is in it is what is really in it. It's hard to do some of these studies. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wanted you to talk about the hash oil and the other products. Can you even smoke heroin for a vape pen?
I know people have tried, and one of the things I know that we're taking this for use for, showing educationally, but I might ask that we have that off camera, just because.
Okay, we don't want to educate anybody.
Yes, that's right.
All right, we can edit that part.
Yes. So, but I think the really important thing for you guys as parents who might be, you're very well educated, your kids are well educated, and I don't know about you guys, but, if you go home and say, well, I heard this was bad, you're going to get potentially some pushback. Oh, well, I heard that it was just fine, and I heard that it doesn't cause cancer. So one of the problems with this field is that it is really new. E-cigarettes, like I said, really, we really just started studying it in about 2011. I mean, that's 7 years ago, which in the field of science and medicine, I mean, that's nothing. It takes, 10 to 20 years for really any type of research to get out into the community. And, for people to know this is the definitive fact. And so the data and the science on traditional cigarettes really took at least 50 years. So we know smoking cigarettes causes lung cancer. We know that it causes heart disease and heart attacks and strokes and lots of really serious things. But what we can say right now is that e-cigarettes have the exact same compounds, but we can't necessarily say that e-cigarette use causes cancer because we just don't have that level of data. Does that make sense? But it doesn't mean, because it hasn't been 50 years, that we can't say we have concerns that it's going to do a lot of the exact same things. And so the other very common pushback, I guess, that you'll hear is, oh, well, they're safer than cigarettes. And I would definitely caution you guys, and there have been some studies, looking at youth and kind of what works to talk with them and what doesn't work to talk with them. Well, we really want to compare e-cigarettes to clean air, to being a non-user of any product. Because if you compare e-cigarettes to cigarettes, which are the most lethal product, legal lethal product known to man, that's never going to be a good comparison. So, I want definitely for you guys to kind of, if you hear people saying, oh, well, it's safer than cigarettes, for our youth and for adults, particularly who are non-smokers, that is never going to be a good comparison. I mean, that's just not the one that is going to bring youth over to saying like, hey, well, this is a harmful product. That's really where we want to go to. This is a product that we know has health harms. We know have things that are very bad for you in them. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So here's a little bit of kind of the science. And basically, for those of you guys who might be interested, there's a 70-page National Academy of Science report which was released earlier this year. They compiled thousands of what we do know about e-cigarettes and put it together. And so I just pulled out some of the parts of it that I thought were really the most concerning. And one of them is that we know that e-cigarettes cause acute endothelial cell dysfunction, which in layman's terms means that it has the same physiology of how cigarettes cause heart disease, cause stroke. E-cigarettes have that same physiology. And so, so that's a really big concern. And in terms of causing cancer, again, e-cigarettes we know, cause that same DNA damage and mutagenesis that we know is how cigarettes cause cancer. And so that's a lot of, that is a grave concern that the same thing is happening with e-cigarettes. And then in terms of adolescents and youth, we have enough information now. I'm a hospitalist at Children's, and what we're seeing mostly all the time is respiratory illness. And so this data is strong in terms of saying to my teenage asthmatics or teenagers who get admitted with pneumonia, when you use an e-cigarette, you're going to be more likely to have respiratory problems. And I think that definitely that is a point that has not been stressed enough in terms of the media, and definitely why I want you guys as parents to know that. So in terms of public health harms, we're going to edit this part out maybe, but this is obviously an advertisement from Blue that is saying, hey, it's okay to use e-cigarettes anywhere. And we have enough data to know that it is not safe for people to use e-cigarettes in public places because of that secondhand vapor. And I'm really thankful to live in Vestavia. I think that we've been leaders in the over-the-mountain area. Our ordinance, our comprehensive smoke-free ordinance does include e-cigarettes, but that's not the same in Birmingham. That's not the same in Hoover. So, just for you guys to be aware, and for you to also know, it's not okay for somebody to be, puffing on a Juul or an e-cigarette next to you because you want to protect yourself and you want to protect your kids. Let's see. And then lastly, just because I know, for me this comes up a lot, hey, I'm a smoker, I want to quit, are e-cigarettes okay? Or do e-cigarettes work? And the answer really is no. And I already mentioned that part of my job is to try to help smokers quit. And, believe me, if there was something that worked, I would be using it. But what we found is that smokers who use regular cigarettes, who use an e-cigarette to try to quit, are less likely to quit. What happens is they end up using both products. They stay with using cigarettes, and then they're also using the e-cigarette. And the potential, because that nicotine concentration is so high, that it could even be that their nicotine addiction is even worse. So definitely that's another big point that, me as a pediatrician, talking to you guys as parents, really I think the key is what it's doing for our kids. But I think we also have a responsibility to let people know, if you are a smoker, you should quit using some of the FDA-approved things. There's something called a 1-800-QUIT-NOW line. Have any of you guys heard of that? It's a free line, a free telephonic line where you can get counseling, and in the state of Alabama, actually 8 weeks of free nicotine patches. So it actually is a really good resource, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. And so really quickly, we're going to talk about FDA regulation because I know people are like, well, why isn't anybody doing anything about this? In 2016, the FDA deemed authority over tobacco products, but that specifically to include e-cigarettes and actually things like premium cigars. But it was, at best, a little bit weak in the fact that it missed a lot of things specifically with kids that we worry about, like the flavoring, the marketing, anything online was not included in this. But unfortunately, the bones of it, which really were that when you have an e-cigarette liquid, that what you put on the label is what you really have in it, those deadlines have all been extended. And so e-cigarette companies, not until August of 2022, have to do that. And so, so that's why really at this point, we can say they're really unregulated. And that's really a shame. But yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so we're passing that around right there, and one of those says 0 milligrams of nicotine. So is there really no nicotine in those
Yeah.
sour Skittles?
So
Is it
such
just
a
sour Skittles to smoke?
Such a good point. I can't speak to that specific product, but what the FDA has done and other scientists is that they've taken some of those products that say there's 0 nicotine and tested them, and they have nicotine in them.
Okay.
Surprise. And so, that is part of the regulation. So if, a company says this is 0 nicotine, we think we should be able to believe it, right? And I'm sure our kids think they can believe it. But at this point, we really don't know. The other thing, kind of more specifically to Juul is that, this did get a lot of media attention, which was great. In September, basically the FDA sent warning letters to Juul and then 4 other e-cigarette companies, which they say make up 97% of the market. And they said, hey, you guys are targeting kids and all the flavors that you're doing in the marketing. I mean, if you look at this marketing, this advertisement that you see, I mean, it clearly is appealing to a youth audience. And they gave them 60 days to come up with a plan. And they also sent warning letters, I think someone, we mentioned enforcement, to different retailers to say, you are not doing what you're supposed to in terms of regulating, youth purchasing. And every state is different. The federal rule is 18 to purchase tobacco products. We mentioned Alabama's 19. Some states, which we'll get into, have gone to that tobacco 21. And so I should be more excited about this, but we'll just scroll through. There was an FDA warning in April, there was an FDA warning in May, and not a lot has happened. I'll point out one thing, because I know many of you guys really noticed that, hey, some of these products look like food products. And so in May, there was specifically a warning letter to say, you are marketing these products to kids as food. And I think, on the left is the e-cigarette product, on the right is the food product. I mean, and there was multiple examples. I think these are 2 of the kind of most jarring ones, like the vanilla wafers, I think is crazy. And so when you think about our younger kids and what they're seeing and how appealing this looks, we're seeing a huge spike in poison control calls for people who get that liquid for kids. Usually they're under 6, who get the liquid and they think it's juice or some sort of candy. And there's even been a child death because the nicotine is so concentrated, and it really is not a lot of nicotine you need to get into a range where it can be really dangerous for you. So I'm going to conclude actually with saying this is what, as parents, what we can do. And we all know, I mean, goodness knows, I don't feel like my kids listen to me, but, to really have a heart-to-heart and say that it's not okay to use tobacco products, and e-cigarettes and Juul and SMPO and Sorn, those are tobacco products, and they have nicotine. And let them know that that's not okay, and the reasons why.